Hitesh,
Sure.
who are you, please?
Sure. So I'm Hidesh Anand, currently Chief Product Officer at a startup, data startup. I have been I landed into the payment space quite by accident from the mobile side of, in Nokia. So from Nokia to Citi to Vodafone. So I know the payment space from the consumer perspective, from the issuer's perspective, from the advisor perspective, from a merchant advisor perspective.
Next is I am CTO and co-founder. Background, operating systems, embedded development, done the video engineering, done even medical devices, mobile phones, etc. And in all of the professional experience, security has always been a pain. And it wasn't until looking at reference designs and medical devices where it's like, you know what, we need to get the security right. And this is the one aspect of the genesis of MagicCube.
And I'm Al Pasquale. I am the head of research, also the head of fraud and security practices at Javelin Strategy and Research. If you don't know who we are a research-based advisory firm focused squarely on financial services. My background is actually out of banking. So I had a real job before I was an analyst. I worked at places like Goldman Sachs, FIS, HSBC, in risk. So I have some real-world experience that I'm applying to some of the technologies that we're advising our clients on. Our clients are primarily, again, big banks, regulators, and technology companies.
Great. All right. Hitesh, let's put you in the spotlight here for a second. Before we get into MagicCube itself, talk about why a SIM card or a chip is needed for payment transactions. Why is that important?
So, when you make a payment transaction, so there are two sides to make a payment transaction. One is the consumer who transmits their payment data. The second is the terminal. Now, when it comes to consumer transferring the payment data, if I am transferring the data through a mobile phone, such as an Apple Pay or Google Pay, I have to store that PAN, the cryptogram that goes with the PAN, and the key that goes with that cryptogram in a secure area, so that malware cannot get into it. So the secure area is the secure element, either in the SIM or in the phone, and one of those places. Now, when I come to the consumer side, my card, the physical card, and the PNB card has a similar analogy. I am storing my PAN, and in case of an online card, my PIN on the card, which is a secure area, so that nothing can get into it. That's why you need a chip for making the payment transaction free as well.
Okay, but it's a secure barrier.
Exactly.
So with millions of devices from many manufacturers entering the ecosystem payment, who's going to make sure that comprehensive hardware protection exists? So who's in charge of that?
Correct. So today, the way it works is you have companies like Vodafone, Ingenico, building dedicated payment devices, tamper-proof dedicated payment devices with secure hardware that goes through certification before the processor gets to it. Once that's manufactured, then a processor or an acquirer will inject the keys remotely through a secure channel so that the payment terminal, let's say I'm at First Data, my payment terminal can now accept payments. Right? That's how it works today. So in this scenario, it's a long supply chain process. Somebody manufactures the device is then provisioned for a specific acquirer, then it is sent to a merchant. And if for any reason somebody tries to tamper the device kind of self-destructs. What that does on the flip side is now it's very hard for me to add new applications to the payment device. So there have been companies who try to do that, but it makes the whole process a lot more complicated. So that is how it works today. It's a hardware-based security that is dedicated, which keeps the cost of the device very high. So if I'm a third party who needs the same data, I can't get it. It's very hard for me to get it.
Well, let's look at examples. Let's take the chip in my credit card. How does that apply to point of sale? How does that work?
So today the way it works is we'll take a chip and pin or chip and SIG as the US example. So I take the chip, the physical card, and dip it into a payment terminal. What happens is that based on the transaction that is occurring, the transaction amount, the date, time, etc., it generates a key, and the chip is sent to the chip. The chip generates a cryptogram and says, I am generating this unique transaction in addition to the PAN that I'm sending out to be sent out for authorization. If it's an online transaction, it goes all the way to the issuer. If it's an offline transaction, then when I enter the PIN on the terminal, it goes back to the chip, is this the right PIN? And the chip says it's the right PIN. The chip in the card holds a lot of stuff. It holds the PAN, it holds the cryptogram, the key for the cryptogram, and also my online PIN. So that's why a whole EMV, a chip and PIN transaction cannot be replayed, because you may capture the PAN, but you can't replay the cryptogram, you don't have access to the PIN.
Okay.
And so that's the key.
I have a feeling that's gonna relate to the MagicCube technology.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Let's move on to Nancy for a second. Nancy, I think you had quite a bit to do with making this happen, which I think is interesting.
Some.
Yes, some, all right. Talk about your research. How did your research lead to a design that is now prompting the security standards body to see that software can effectively replace hardware in creating protection and isolation in processing sensitive operations?
That's a long question.
That is a very long question.
Okay.
Yeah.
So research, I will be absolutely honest. It's not like I went out and said, let's research. Because if you go for research, you read papers and then you get influenced by what you read, and then suddenly you have more of the same. We took a different approach. The approach is, here's a problem, right? How do we solve it? We don't believe in anything else that's being said. Let's just see how we can handle that. So if you remember, background operating systems and, embedded, et cetera, so we're looking at the code that is sensitive and data from an external perspective. So how do we secure that? How do we make, and so this is point number one. Point number two, why is it, even though we have the cryptography, we have the protocols, we have all of this, and we still have breaches? And one of the answers is that it is difficult to adopt. So software engineers may take an easy way out or implement something that is not complete, so ease of adoption. The third part is, operationally, there's an aspect to security. So how do you make sure that the solution that we come up with is robust, is easy operationally, so you can react or be proactive about it? And how do you make it actually secure the information that is there? And then finally, there is the concept, which again, if we went the traditional research, the big brother, IT, of a big enterprise. Well, in real life, your mobile device is not connected to the enterprise of the bank or connected to the enterprise of your company. So then it's a matter of, in the absence of all this and the presence of all this, how do we solve that? And this is how we came with the concept, which is, how do we ensure that the code that is executing is the intended code, that the operating system services is the intended services? How do we make sure of all of this? And in the absence of the network, or even if the network is subverted, how do we make sure that this one last thing has to execute, ensure everything to safety? And safety here means even, including destruction of sensitive data that is there. So this is how we came up with, okay, let's build our own environment. Let's build what we build is what we can trust and what we can measure, away from the operating system, away from everybody else. So this is how we came about, looking at the problem from the outside as opposed to jumping in and do what the rest of the people are doing.
One question, if you're using the system's memory, how are you able to isolate from the underlying operating system? How does that technology work?
Is everybody under NDA? Just, okay. Look at what do operating systems do? They provide context, right? It tells the app where the data is. It tells the app how to use a certain service, and if to use a certain service, these are the conditions to use it. Everything is clear out there. That's what the operating system does. So let's not, okay? So what we did is that in certain areas, we went non-traditionally, to kind of make it more difficult. In other areas, we went medieval on it. So that's really, so in essence, answer is we removed the context that explains to the viewer, to the attacker, where everything is. Now, only us know where everything is.
When you say go medieval on it, you mean you went really harsh in your
Yes.
execution?
Yes, and we enjoyed it.
Oh, okay. You're using container technology, true? Is it?
Right,
Okay, so
right.
is it mainly relying on container technology, or is there something else in the mix there?
There are multiple things that are actually in play. One of them is the container technology. The container technology, and this is now the BT or the software T, the trusted execution environment. Now, if we add to it an ephemeral nature, as in it comes up when it's necessary to, and it goes down when it's not supposed to be doing anything. So therefore, it's not there obvious for anyone to experiment with. So this is, but yes, it's a container technology plus multiple other things.
Okay. I'm gonna have a long question if you're ready for this. And so you effectively built a virtual version of a security chip that the industry now wants to call a virtual trusted execution environment. That's like the phrase, virtual trusted execution environment, or VTEE. What's a use case for that in the real world?
What do you want?
I mean,
Yeah, 'cause
I'm
that's
guessing you
the
probably have
thing,
done.
you know, so with all of this, what we described, and I'll tell you what, I'll get to that. With all that we just described, what our team, what we built, is simple to adopt, like literally in any use case, we count how many interfaces we export, how many APIs we do. So this is to take the ease of use. Now, when we come to how do we make, where is it applicable? It really is applicable to any regulated industry. Anyone who has sensitive information or regulated information or data or flows that need to be protected, proactively and reactively is a potential beneficiary of this technology. So you have certainly fintech, whether on the payment side or the acceptance side, and you have autonomous and connected vehicles. Because again, think about so many use cases in autonomous vehicles. The simplest of which is you have a route. You hail an autonomous car, you have a route, you're supposed to go to that destination. How do you know that route is what is the real one, that you're not taking elsewhere? Where's the security there? Let's say the passenger before you, they have electronic devices. How do you know that there was no malicious devices that got into the network? So that's another thing. Having a virtual container that understands this and revamps the whole security environment to ensure that you start from a clean slate or defend while you're there, while the malicious device is there. So there is this. There's the bedside medical devices, morphine pump, insulin pump, all of this. How do you make sure, now, if it's in a house, are you going to have an IT presence there? What if the router, we know that routers have vulnerabilities. So how do you ensure this? So that's also another one. So there are really, IoT, when you talk about IoT, that's another thing. With 5G coming in with pretty much, machine to machine. So how do you solve that?
So to add to what Nancy's saying, the simplest first use case of secure area was mobile phones. So your SIM card is actually a secure chip. So the network is open, right? Now, when I make a phone call, the network knows it's Hitesh making the phone call because it's coming from my phone. The phone is open OS, but the chip, the SIM card has its own OS called SIM toolkit, and it authenticates me and my phone. Same analogy, right, applies to every connected device going forward. So if my car, for example, if it were a car that is getting an update, how do I know I'm getting an update for the right car from the right network? So every connected device, the first connected device is the mobile phone, and it requires security in the form of a hardware chip. Now every connected device that will come out in the future cannot have a hardware chip for that security, for that storing the key, for doing authentication.
Because it would require too many chips.
Too many chips and too costly, and post-provisioning, right? Because the phone came with, you can't buy a phone without a SIM card, right? multiple secure applications. So how do you provision that? And that's where I think the real value is of a solution like this, where any connected device can become secure going forward without a hardware from get-go. That's the use case.
I want to move on to Al, but Nancy, did you get your point about use cases? There's a lot of use cases.
Yeah, I mean, we can spend a few more, a bit more time on that, but
Yeah, or we'll get back to it as well.
Yeah.
Okay. Al, there's an impact note coming out, I am told. It's going to be released at Money2020. What's the skinny on this one?
So, Javelin provides guidance to our financial services clients, and there's a type of research that we do. We call it the impact note. The goal of an impact note is to advise our clients on significant events they need to know about now. And I don't know if I'm jumping too far ahead, but
You're right.
we know that we know EMVCo is looking to come out with a virtual TEE certification. And for our financial services clients, which include obviously a lot of folks in the payment space, that is a very big deal. And so we went out, tried to understand what the implications would be, and provide some independent guidance on the meaning of that change.
Okay. What about, how would the industry be affected if this isolation that Nancy's talking about proves to be on par or even better than the current hardware isolation? It seems like it'd be a pretty big shift.
It is. I was trying to think of a good way to put this, and I love examples. I'm not sure, of the background of the entire audience, but a good example as to why something like this makes a difference is, anyone remember ISIS? Not the terrorist group. So that's I was gonna. That's my phrase. So you ruined my plan. No, so soft card, right? I mean, that is a prime example of what happens when you have these kind of walled gardens, where organizations control access to those hardware containers in essence, right? What this is essentially going to allow a lot of our clients to do is to get access and have trust in, a massive range of devices, not just mobile phones, but also the entire IoT, to do things like payments and not have to worry about supply chain issues or getting past the carrier or manufacturer or whoever created the onboard chipset. And that's incredibly meaningful when you think about the fact that in the United States alone, there's 890 million consumer IoT devices. That's in the US. And I mean, so many of those devices can be set up to access banking, access payments. And I mean, it's a total game changer if it works.
No, Alexa made, Alexa buy my ticket, right? Exactly, right? So, yeah.
What about EMVCo? And I think you might want to explain this. Some folks might not know who EMVCo is, but the question is, how are they approaching innovations in the sector right now? What are their stance?
So I can't necessarily speak for EMVCo.
Right.
Now, EMVCo is a payment standard body, and they are, in essence, chartered with setting up standards for a lot of the payment security technologies that we use every day. So obviously EMV, which are the chip cards that we all have in our wallets, they are also responsible for 3D Secure now, which got a kind of a mixed start here in the States, but globally is a really significant standard. And I mean, they're trying to making everything safe. And I think 3D Secure is actually a good corollary kind of example, right? While they're setting standards for what happens with things like secure elements and payments, 3D Secure is it's really a software technology, right? The software, 3D Secure allows scale. It's addressing a huge online fraud problem. What they're doing with virtual TEE is, kind of looking, or they looked at a problem or a missed opportunity, right, in payments, where there's just there's been kind of like tepid adoption in some places around mobile payments. There's all this potential and opportunity around IoT, and there's nothing but security risk, right? So, how can they, create a standard that, the brands can get behind, and payment companies can leverage, and banks and consumers feel good about? And I think that's what's led them to another, software approach, certifying another software technology, the virtual TEE.
What about looking in the future a little bit? If you gaze into your crystal ball, what do you see coming up, say, 3 to 5 years from now in terms of digital transactions?
It's tough not to pick winners and losers.
I think
Everyone's a client.
They're probably movies.
We're talking a lot about card payments, but I mean, there's all kinds of innovation going on in the payment space. One of the big things for our clients is what we call P2P payments. So, Venmo, Zelle, and there's a wealth of others, but I mean, those are some of the big ones. You start to think about, being able to conduct all different types of payment transactions, right? Imagine making just like a P2P payment with Alexa. Being able to do that securely when Alexa is being embedded in everything, everywhere, right? And you have all those supply chain issues.
Right.
I mean, we're gonna have, we have an environment where people are gonna be able to move money anytime, anywhere, with nothing more than their voice or a tap, right? From any type of account in all kinds of different ways. And so if we don't have to mess with hardware, run into that soft card issue,
Right.
we have to get past those gatekeepers, that's gonna open all of that up, right? Whether it's
Right.
acceptance and, consumer mobile devices that take payments pretty much anywhere, anytime, or being able to make those payments anywhere, anytime from your kitchen, from your living room, from your laundry room.
Right.
I mean, that's a different world.
Voice-only commerce, actually.
Yeah,
Huh.
right, and all kinds of commerce, right? So it's not just purchasing, it's paying other people, right? It's banking.
Right. What about regulation? What role do you think regulation will play in the digital transaction process?
Oh, man.
That's a tough one. Yeah.
So this last year has been a really big year, right? So with GDPR in Europe, and now we're starting to see regulation here in the States that mirror GDPR, like the recent California privacy legislation. We're hearing out of Vermont now that they're going to follow suit. The fact of the matter is, there's a lot of concern about data privacy. There was always concern about privacy, but now we're talking about data, keeping it safe. And after all the breaches that we've seen, it started to hit home for consumers, right? After you hear Facebook, then the everyday consumer does start to get concerned. So we have these regulations in place, and for the payments industry, they can be meaningful, right? So I mean, there are provisions that allow payment organizations to retain data if they need it for payments, but they're collecting a ton of PII because they want to know about you, right? I want to track you over time. I want to extend loyalty and benefits and just understand you as a consumer. And I'm doing that point of sale. I'm doing it online. I'm going to be doing it in the IoT. But GDPR says I have to give the consumer the right to have me delete all their data. Right? And it gets real tricky. And now we're talking about potentially leveraging the blockchain here too, where data is immutable, and then we get into forking. It gets to be a giant mess. So I think the payment industry is working very hard to sort it out. And we're only starting to get guidance. I mean, recent guidance out of France is making some allowances that are going to work with the blockchain and everything else. But I mean, these regulations are incredibly meaningful for the payments industry.
Right. Thinking of looking at the three of you, if you answer this, what is the impact on the volume of digital transactions? And you may have touched on this, Al. If the virtual trusted execution environment comes through, I guess the answer really is to be massive. It could be everywhere. Nancy, thoughts on that?
I don't know what to say. It's gonna be huge. It's gonna be, it's gonna be big. And all I can say is that to manage software is significant. It is more possible than managing hardware, and it is significantly easier for whatever is at stake, and to be able to have control over the security, which is what the BT allows, or what software allows, is a huge advantage. So when we say the impact of the presence of an intelligent entity, and that's the BT, the intelligent entity, it is going to be felt and measured in every single industry where PII is important, where money is involved, and where safety and security, whether transportation or you name it, is at stake.
What about the hardware makers? If this really takes on or takes hold and it's more of a software focus, what happens to all those hardware makers?
Yeah. So, like any new technology, adoption takes time, right? Winning converts takes time. I think that there are clear logistical benefits that come with a software-based approach to security. Right? Some of the things that we've kind of already mentioned, right? Going around the middleman, saving money, speed to market, and all the rest. Now, I am sure that you will still have pockets of the market where hardware is going to be preferred. And I will say this from a research perspective, one of the things we couched in the research is, we don't know if there are going to be any call-outs from EMVCO as to, use cases that are deemed less than optimal. Right? So it's not to say,
That's
but,
okay.
but I mean, have sightlines yet into why they would say that.
Okay.
But there inevitably are gonna be use cases where hardware will be preferred. Or it could be, places like the military, right? The kind of thing instinctually where, they may also be biased towards, hardware over software.
Right.
Let
So-
me take, okay. go ahead.
So now I was gonna add, there is a parallel trend as well, which will make this, in my opinion, a lot more valuable. So, when a merchant buys a payment terminal today, they don't just buy a payment terminal, they buy a POS as well, they buy a point of sales, like Bell, like Speed, etc.
Right.
So, and that whole POS business is going to the cloud, going to software from on-premise NCR or what technology. And today, when I want to get, let's say, a Lightspeed POS, my POS is right there on the App Store. I have a tablet, it's right there, but I can't accept payments until 7 days or 10 days or 15 days later when a physical terminal arrives at my store, right? So when I look at this trend, and when I look at a software-based security solution, then I don't need a physical terminal to arrive. I can download, quote unquote, a software terminal and start payment right there. So there are other parallel trends that are going to the cloud and software that will impact the benefit of a software-based payment acceptance environment. And so that's a huge, I would say, an impetus for these kind of things to adopt, should go up.
So for hardware, it's going to erode, but it's not gonna disappear. Because today, everybody who thinks that hardware is it when it comes to security is seeing the breaches, even though all the hardware is there. So clearly, hardware is not cutting the bill for everyone, it's not. So what we're going to see, and this is, and even to quote Martin Andreessen, software eating the world, and while it's not eating the entire world, but most of the world. So the role of hardware hardware will still have a role, but it's not gonna be the solution for every single security problem, for every single use case in every single industry. It is now proven that it is not, it's not cutting it. So this is what I think is gonna happen in the future when it comes to hardware security or hardware-based security. The other thing is, which you brought up, Al brought up with military. There is a report from the FBI and for the White House in 2011 that was posted, and it said with hardware getting manufactured outside of the U.S., we're finding it very difficult to trust the actual hardware. Therefore, what we're saying here is that for the software you build and you control, the one that can come up and down, the one that can mutate and modify its nature and present use cases or present defenses that you have control over, it's actually something that is piquing interest of other industries that go beyond the regulated industry. So will hardware disappear? No, hardware will still continue to be there for sure. It's just, it's not going to be as pervasive as what we're seeing today.
And to be fair, it's not as though EMV cards are gonna go away. So a lot of people, talked about the death of cards, and, I don't know any client who's really taking that seriously at this point.
This
Right.
process checks, right?
People still use checks, right?
Yes.
Seriously,
Yeah.
still process checks.
I use cash occasionally.
Yeah.
So there are gonna be plenty of, use cases, for, physical chip security, for a while to come, but the fact of the matter is, software alternative that actually works, right? So it'd be better than white box. It has really just a ton of potential, and it is gonna displace hardware in a lot of situations.
It's a lot of good stuff. I think I learned something. Is there anything you want to add? Did we miss something? What else is really important? What really matters?
I think, what I'd say, what we are missing here is the type of innovation that will ride on top of the secure software security. That we can't, we are only trying to point to examples that we know of or are aware of today, right? So we say, oh, this was happened here, this happened here. So, and if you look at the history of software, whenever some new paradigm comes on, blockchain came as a very for currency, right, for a ledger. But now look at the implications of blockchain and
Right.
where it's been innovated. Host of ways that we didn't
Right.
imagine going forward. So what I'm trying to say is that our viewpoint is biased to what we know, and I think what we don't know is more important than what we know.
Uh-huh.
And that's where the value of things like this come in.
Where is that unknown, I mean, where do you see that unknown residing? Is there a way to answer that? Next year.
I don't know that. That's what I'm
Right.
saying. I can point to the areas I know. I say here it can apply, here it can
Yeah.
apply, here it can apply.
Yeah.
But somebody
Right.
will come up with a solution where it applies. Oh, we didn't pick up this.
Right, it's a quantum leap, yeah. Anything else, other thoughts, closing thoughts?
All I can think of, and I'm sorry if I have a myopic, view at this point, all I can think of right now is that, for a security solution to be effective, it has to be adoptable, it has to be easy, and it has to make sense operationally. That's all I can, think of at this time. And if we deliver on these two, that opens up the horizons, as Hitesh is saying. You'll never know what other use cases is going to, or are going to, emerge. And not the flip side, but, complementary to, ease of adoption. The more messy a technology is, i.e. blockchain, the more messy a technology is, the bigger attack surface there is. So simplification, ease of adoption, ease of operation are low-hanging fruit, for a viable security solution. And that's, mostly delivered by software.
Mel, let me get your last thought, or that's? yeah?
No, I didn't talk too much about, about the ePICO process and, I think the implications for stakeholders within our client organizations, like as individuals. If I'm going to choose to, go down a particular path, right, to secure my data, whether it's payment credentials or certs or whatever else I want to secure on these devices, having something that is certified by a standard body is going to go a long way to positively affecting my decision. It's a bit of a, can I say CYA, right, without spelling it out? But in fact of the matter is, that's something I can point to, right, to my clients, to my bosses. It's something I can feel good about knowing, especially if it's a good standards body, right? I can feel good about at the end of the day. So I think that is also an important aspect of this, right? So we want to educate our clients as to why it's meaningful, and if it makes sense, but also just simply making them aware of the fact that, it's not as though MagicCube all of a sudden showed up today with a solution, right? But their solution is being looked at as the first within this new category of certification. And so once that happens, I think that's going to be a very meaningful thing for them to be aware of, and they can act on and feel good about. So I think once you guys come out of certification, that's probably going to be a lot more folks not competing for.
That will be a big enhancement. Well, I thank you very much for sharing your expertise today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for listening. We want to open up to questions? We have some questions for the panelists? Please.
Question for Al. PII, when you get to IoT like a car, is that still PII, where my car goes, that type of thing? What's your position?
So I think the easy answer is, well, if it's associated with my personally identifiable information, then yes. If I can separate location data from an actual individual, right? So we actually had a conversation on the way in. If I can know that location data is always associated with the same individual, but I don't know who that individual is, right? So I'm tokenizing in a way that individual's identity, then the location data in and of itself is not identifiable, right? It doesn't lead you back to the person. So I think it's kind of how you parse it.
And specifically, the question becomes around fleet automobiles, right? So fleet automobiles will get tracked more, there'll be more security issues and so on. So in a fleet automobile, is that really PII or is that not? It's a gray area.
It's a gray area. So in my opinion, it is PI. Why? Because so let's take an example. You make a pickup here and drop off here. Now you don't know who you picked up and who you dropped off, but you can now associate with other databases who lives here. So if you know the route, if the route information is open, you can look at third-party databases and make a mapping, and you can identify me. So it is PII. So and people have done that. Anonymizing does not work if there are other data that you can apply on top in back.
I mean, but what I would argue is that there's, this is all still being sorted out, right, from a regulatory standpoint. Or there's an article recently about behavioral data, right, in the New York Times, and they were asking the question, if banks are using behavioral data, you know, is that PII, right? It's about my behavior as an individual. And while there's nothing I've heard from regulators up to this point where they specifically said that's problematic, that is PII, it's starting to be raised, right? And so we're getting all these new wonderful ways to use and leverage data to know about customers. And it's things like location, you know, like behavior, like the data that we get from mobile network operators, and all these different areas where we don't quite know yet if it's technically PII, because regulators haven't said it is. But it looks and feels a lot like it, because to a certain point you can back out and use it to identify somebody. But technically, right, if a regulator came and said, is that PII, and they did the test, and they're gonna say no. But, I mean, they could change their mind in a minute. All you need is, you know, Senator Warren to say, wait a minute, right, or the state of, you know, California AG's office to say, no, 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 right, in a paper, and all of a sudden.
But in fleet management, there's this company or enterprise that has that fleet and it's fleet management. So it's really the passenger that is PII, you know. The car itself is an identity. Now the fact that this hasn't been, you know, legislated or it hasn't been defined. So, you know, is the car a PII in its own right? Don't think so. But is the passenger a PII? That's for sure. So that's a different angle, I think.
But I think this question was on the route. So the route is PII.
It's all of the above, and I think adding security to IoT is key.
Yes.
Protecting
Right.
people's individual,
But the
but
route-
also, what's
Okay,
the rules?
so the route is not PII unless it is attached to the passenger, and the passenger by definition is PII.
Right, because to be fair, so how, like if I'm on the defending side of your question here, I'm gonna say, well, 5 people could live at that address, right? So now you'd have to know who lives there and who could have possibly been at the origination address at the same time. So there's certain degrees of separate, but.
Have you talked to regulators? Are they looking at redefining as, I mean, things change, right? Are they looking to redefine?
I'm sorry. Was that-
After that, sorry.
A question, okay. So within the banking space, I'm speaking largely from the banking space at this point. Within the banking space, your address information that banks use, that is PII, right? But other ways that banks have, you know, identified you by location is by using things like IP address, which is not specific, right, and can't be tied reliably to one individual. I think where things have started to kind of, you know, go to a world where, you know, that you're more interested in is in the mobile data, right? Because now we're talking about something that's tied to a SIM, right? That could be, you know, basically said with 100% certainty that it is in fact Al's device. Now, if you start to get that location data, right, and you're leveraging that location data to do things like identify somebody, right, and understand whether or not they're a legitimate customer, and then it starts to become much more like PII. So I guess it really depends on the use case and the type of location data you're talking about. I can't speak to specifically the fleet, but it's not cut and dry. But I think people are looking at it harder and they're trying to figure it out.
Yeah, it feels to me that the technology is ahead of the regulation. For example,
Which is usually
to
the case.
Hitesh's point, I deal a lot with marketing technologies, and for today, if you put a Gmail to get a white paper, there's services that will, at a 40% accuracy, will correlate that to a business email address. So these companies are getting the business email, and they might have given the permission to get news or blog updates. So now they start to set, because the individual did, but maybe on that email, in Gmail, because they don't check it, but then now you're sending it to their corporate email. And in the GDPR world, we're starting to see companies that treat the USA, which is a default opt-in, separate from the European countries where you have to go to a landing page, click the checkbox, and then say that you're allowed to do that. So those kind of things, GDPR, are going to have to hit the connected auto, connected whatever world as well. And I think that technology, to Hitesh's point, the correlation of data is happening faster than the regulations can catch up, right? So.
Quick question on EMV co-watching and what their timeline is. How does the process work? Is this like drug approval process? Are there milestones? EMV Co. watcher community?
So again, I can't necessarily speak for them, right? My understanding is that expecting it by year end, possibly sooner. The fact of the matter is, they're looking for whether or not this works or doesn't work, right? You have to understand that the hardware testing process by EMVCO is incredibly rigorous, right? If you think about like the labs that the brands have, right, to do some of that same kind of testing, you're talking about, hitting these chips with lasers.
Consumer unions.
No, seriously, no, hitting these chips with like lasers, right? I mean, they're really, the testing can be considerable for every upgrade of that technology to make sure that it passes certification. So it's a deep process. The catch here is that in the case of MagicCube, it's the first time, right? So in a way, they're kind of doing this anew. And the only other real software technology that they've gone through this process for, and it's not really because they kind of inherited it, is 3D Secure, right? So while end of year is probably like drop dead, I doubt it would go past that. It could be sooner, but when you're doing something for the first time and your strength of knowledge is more on the hardware side, it's somewhere in there. But you want to be optimistic, but fortunately, at least you guys are the first, right? And that actually works to their advantage too.
Any other questions? Thanks for coming out today. Thank you.
Thank you very much.